Millionaire Robert Sterling, a name synonymous with power and mystery in Chicago, lived in a penthouse high above the city, a steel and glass fortress reflecting his empire and his isolation. His world, meticulously built on ruthless deals and cold calculations, was as sterile as the modern art that adorned his walls. No family photos, just expensive emptiness. At 70, Sterling, facing a terminal diagnosis, stared down at a fortune that felt like shackles, not a triumph. Friends had become ghosts, intimidated by his wealth or repelled by his icy demeanor. He was richer than anyone he knew, and yet utterly alone. His daughter Jessica was his polar opposite. Fiery, emotional, everything Sterling wasn't. Their relationship was a battlefield since her childhood. He'd shown affection through trust funds, believing material comfort was love. Jessica craved warmth, a father's embrace, things he couldn't give. The chasm between them widened into an abyss, culminating in Jessica cutting ties completely. Sterling, pride a thicker skin than love, let her go, another casualty in his relentless pursuit of success. Patricia, his wife, was a study in ambition. Drawn to Sterling's power, her admiration had curdled into resentment. Status was her oxygen, and Sterling's fading health was an opportunity, not a heartbreak. She and their son, Michael, a chip off the old block when it came to ruthless ambition, circled like vultures, waiting for the inevitable. Their plan was simple: seize control, leave Jessica nothing. Sarah, the nurse hired to navigate Sterling's decline, possessed a quiet strength and deep empathy. Unlike Patricia and Michael, Sarah saw past the steel facade. She saw a man drowning in regret. She noticed the way Sterling flinched from the framed photo of Jessica on his nightstand, the silent tears that welled when her name was mentioned. Sarah became more than a caregiver. She became a reluctant confidant. Her presence, professional yet warm, thawed the ice in the penthouse. She understood Sterling's deepest need wasn't medication, but mercy, reconciliation, a desperate chance to mend broken bridges. As Sterling weakened, tension in the penthouse thickened. Patricia and Michael watched Sarah with suspicion, seeing her as another obstacle. But to Sterling, Sarah was a lifeline, his last shot at redemption. The penthouse, opulent yet cold, was a vacuum of human warmth. Heavy drapes blocked the city lights. Time itself seemed to stagnate, and into this void Sarah stepped, offering not just medical care but something far rarer, genuine human connection. Sarah quickly learned that her role went beyond administering pills. Sterling needed to confess a life lived on the edge, a life of calculated risks and devastating losses. She sat by his bedside, a silent witness to his empire's architect unraveling. Conversations deepened, revealing the man beneath the myth. He spoke of Jessica, his voice cracking with a pain that resonated in the sterile room. He remembered her childhood, her bright smile, her endless questions, the garden games he'd always been too busy for, a wave and a retreat to his office. These memories were both solace and torment, a constant reminder of time squandered, love unexpressed. One afternoon, during a particularly raw confession, Sterling voiced his deepest regret, the irreparable rift with Jessica. Time was running out, and with it, a desperate urgency. Then, in a moment of vulnerability that shattered his carefully constructed persona, Sterling made an extraordinary request. He looked at Sarah, his eyes pleading, and asked her to pretend to be Jessica for a day. Sarah was stunned, the weight of the request pressing down on her. Ethical boundaries blurred, emotions tangled. But in Sterling's broken gaze, she saw not a demand but a desperate plea. Sarah, her heart heavy, agreed. The next day, Sarah entered Sterling's room, dressed simply, a stark contrast to the penthouse's lavishness. She imagined this was how Jessica might dress. Sterling lay in bed, frail, fading. When he saw Sarah, tears streamed down his face. It wasn't just seeing Sarah, it was the fragile illusion, the fleeting chance to feel his daughter's love. Sarah, her voice soft with compassion, began to speak as Jessica. She recounted childhood memories Sterling had shared, her tone warm, loving. Sterling closed his eyes, surrendering to the illusion, letting the memories wash over him. She spoke of Jessica's dreams, dreams Sterling had never bothered to hear, of a future that now, tragically, would never be for them. Her words were a balm, easing the lifetime of regret, if only for a moment. He knew, somewhere deep down, this wasn't Jessica. But in that moment, reality didn't matter. He felt, however briefly, the love, the connection he'd lost. For Sarah, it was a sacrifice, a profound act of compassion, offering a dying man a sliver of peace. After Sarah's visit, Sterling was adrift in a sea of emotions, joy, and sorrow colliding within him. He'd tasted the phantom closeness of Jessica's love, a bittersweet ache. For the first time in decades, he wept openly, confessing his regrets, his longing for Jessica, his voice raw with pain. He was a shattered titan, finally confronting the emptiness wealth had built around him. Sarah held his hand, her touch offering a comfort that transcended words. "I forgive you, Dad," she whispered, her voice filled with a sincerity born of deep empathy. "You did the best you could. Find peace now." Her words, a compassionate fiction, brought Sterling an unexpected serenity. A weight lifted, a momentary respite from his agony. He closed his eyes, a deep breath escaping his lips. But the fragile peace shattered. The door burst open, a cold draft preceding Patricia and Michael. Behind them, a lawyer entered, briefcase in hand, carrying the weight of Sterling's fortune. Their arrival was an intrusion, a brutal return to reality. Sterling looked at Patricia, seeing calculation, impatience, not a wife's concern, but a predator's hunger. He realized, with a jolt of bitterness, that while he'd been lost in regret, seeking redemption, they'd been waiting for this moment, not for comfort, but for their inheritance. The atmosphere shifted, the room suffocating with tension. The hope in Sterling's eyes dimmed, replaced by a cold sadness. Patricia, her voice controlled but edged with impatience, began, "Robert, it's time to discuss your final wishes. We need to get everything in order." She nodded to the lawyer, who efficiently opened his briefcase, flipping through papers. "This document outlines the distribution of your assets." The lawyer droned, his tone neutral, his gaze flicking to Patricia and Michael. Sterling felt like an object to be divided, not a man nearing his end. The fragile peace from Sarah's visit hardened into a renewed resolve. He wouldn't surrender. Not yet. He pressed his lips together, exhaustion warring with determination. This wasn't the end. Sterling listened in silence as Patricia and the lawyer spoke, each word a cold blade. Betrayal was a heavy shroud, suffocating him. To Patricia and Michael, he'd been a means to an end, a resource to be exploited until his last breath. The illusion of family dissolved, revealing a chilling inhumanity. Anger and sorrow warred within him. His life, built on power and control, was crumbling. The Titan, who once bent the world to his will, was now a fragile pawn. He wanted to rage, to fight, but his body was a prison. Impotence, a taste he'd never known, was now his reality. That night, the penthouse felt even colder, more desolate. Sterling lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind a maelstrom of memories. Shadows danced on the walls, each one a ghost of past decisions, each one heavier than the last. He replayed his life, every choice that had built his empire, but also erected walls around his heart. Loneliness was a vast, empty desert, and he was lost, compassless, hopeless. Sarah's comforting presence, a fleeting oasis, receded, replaced by a gnawing distrust. Was she genuine? Or was everyone ultimately after something? Years of navigating treacherous deals, of being surrounded by opportunists, had bred paranoia. Even Sarah's kindness felt suspect. In her small room in the staff quarters, Sarah wrestled with her own turmoil. The night was still, but her mind raced. Sterling's desperate plea, his raw vulnerability, haunted her. She understood his request wasn't madness, but a cry for peace. Her empathy was real, but now, witnessing Patricia and Michael's predatory hunger, doubt crept in. Should she intervene further? She was a nurse, not a savior. Ethics warred with human instinct. Intervention could jeopardize her position, but inaction felt like complicity. The dilemma was a vice. Her decision would shape Sterling's final days, and that weight pressed heavily on her conscience. As the night deepened, both Sterling and Sarah were trapped in their own emotional labyrinths. Sterling, consumed by distrust, couldn't find solace. Sarah, at a crossroads, wrestled with duty and conscience. The choice she made in the coming hours would define not just Sterling's fate, but perhaps her own. The next morning, tension in the penthouse was a palpable force as the lawyer returned. Impeccably dressed, radiating calculated professionalism, he carried the leather briefcase containing Sterling's will. He spoke in measured tones, suggesting adjustments to simplify the succession, easing the transfer of assets to Patricia and Michael. The words were smooth, legalistic, but the subtext was clear. Sterling, weakened but not broken, felt a surge of defiance. This was a final battle for control. For his legacy, his survival instinct, honed in countless boardroom wars, flared. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Sterling interrupted, his voice raspy but sharp. He questioned the lawyer's motives, probing for the hidden agenda. Each evasive answer fueled Sterling's suspicion. The lawyer, he realized, wasn't just a professional advisor, but a collaborator in Patricia's scheme. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably, surprised by Sterling's unexpected resistance. His composure faltered, revealing cracks of nervousness. Sarah, observing from the periphery, grasped the depth of Sterling's isolation, his despair. She saw the struggle in his eyes, a man clinging to control as his world crumbled. His vulnerability, coupled with his fierce determination, resonated deeply within her. He was fighting a losing battle, not just against illness, but against those who should be his family. Empathy ignited into indignation. Sarah wouldn't stand by. Her role was limited, but her conscience wouldn't allow inaction. She decided to act. Sarah began to investigate, subtly, discreetly. She engaged the penthouse staff in casual conversations, weaving a web of questions, gathering fragments of information. Innocuous clues coalesced into a disturbing picture of Patricia and Michael's machinations. She reached out, cautiously, to old contacts, legal experts, seeking knowledge, ammunition. Late nights were spent poring over legal documents, searching for loopholes, strategies to protect Sterling. She uncovered hidden documents, financial records, emails, a trail of evidence pointing to a meticulously planned scheme to strip Sterling bare. The scale of the betrayal chilled her, but hardened her resolve. Patricia and Michael weren't just opportunists, they were predators. Time was running out. Sterling was fading. Every moment lost was an advantage for his enemies. Sarah prepared for a clandestine war, a silent fight for Sterling's dignity, his legacy. The morning light crept into Sterling's penthouse. Sarah, heart pounding, entered his room. He sat in bed, eyes distant, mind sharp. Hesitation flickered, then resolve. She approached, her voice firm, gentle. She revealed what she'd discovered. Patricia's manipulations, Michael's greed, the lawyer's complicity. Sterling listened in silence, his gaze hardening. Anger, sorrow, then something else. Gratitude. "You risked everything to tell me this," he said, his voice weak but sincere. "I didn't expect anyone to care." Sarah smiled softly. "I couldn't watch them take everything, Mr. Sterling. You deserve better." A flicker of warmth ignited in Sterling's chest, a feeling long dormant. Sarah's loyalty gave him strength. He knew what he had to do. His mind, still sharp, began to formulate a plan. He asked Sarah to arrange a meeting, the lawyer, Patricia, Michael. Sarah hesitated, fear gnawing at her, but Sterling's eyes held a lucidity, a fierce resolve she couldn't ignore. She agreed. Hours later, they gathered in the grand living room, a space echoing Sterling's power. Tension hung thick in the air, masked by Patricia and Michael's forced smiles. The lawyer, briefcase in hand, awaited instructions. Sterling entered, leaning heavily on a cane, feigning weakness. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice tired yet authoritative. "It's time to finalize things." Patricia stepped forward, a veneer of concern. "Of course, Robert. We want to ensure your wishes are honored." Sterling almost smiled at the hypocrisy. He nodded to the lawyer. The lawyer began to outline the modifications, emphasizing the benefits for Patricia and Michael. But instead of acquiescing, Sterling began to question, each question precise, incisive, making the lawyer squirm. Patricia and Michael grew impatient. Michael snapped, a sarcastic remark betraying his frustration. Sterling seized the moment. "I've been thinking," he said, his gaze fixed on Patricia and Michael, "and I've realized there are still things to set right." He paused, letting his words hang. "I've decided to revise the will, with someone I trust." The room went silent. Sarah felt a surge of relief. Sterling wasn't just resisting, he was fighting back. Patricia protested. "Robert, you don't need this stress." Sterling cut her off, his voice steel. "My decision is final, Patricia, and no one will manipulate me again." He rose, Sarah's arm supporting him. At the door, he turned back. "You underestimated my will, Patricia Michael, and you will pay the price." Leaving the room, Sterling felt a spark of renewed energy. With Sarah, he would reclaim his legacy. Night descended on the penthouse, silence thick with tension. Patricia and Michael, confident of victory, were oblivious to the clandestine meeting unfolding. Sterling, with Sarah's help, had arranged a discreet rendezvous with a different lawyer, one beyond Patricia's reach. The new lawyer, experienced, discreet, arrived unnoticed, escorted by Sarah to Sterling's study. The study, a sanctuary of mahogany and power, was the perfect stage for Sterling's final gambit. The lawyer found Sterling by the fireplace, flames casting shadows on his determined face. "Thank you for coming," Sterling began, his voice low, firm. "I need your help. I need to correct a grave error." The lawyer, intrigued, leaned forward. Sterling revealed his intentions. A complete rewrite of the will. He wanted his fortune to reflect his true values, not Patricia and Michael's greed. Charitable causes, long neglected, would become primary beneficiaries. Sterling spoke with a clarity that belied his failing health. Sarah watched, her heart pounding, knowing the risks. The lawyer agreed. Secrecy was paramount. "I've always been a man of action," Sterling said, his gaze intense. "Even now, I won't let my legacy be distorted. Let's do this right." The meeting concluded with a handshake, a silent pact. Sarah escorted the lawyer out, relief flooding her. Returning to the study, she found Sterling exhausted but resolute. "We need to be fast," he whispered. "Time is running out." Sarah nodded, her expression determined. "We will, Mr. Sterling. We're in this together." Helping him back to bed, Sarah knew the final act had begun. Days bled into weeks. Sterling weakened, each breath a struggle, but his resolve remained unyielding. He felt the clock ticking, urgency driving him. Sarah was his constant companion, her admiration deepening. She navigated the legal complexities, ensuring the new will was airtight. But fear gnawed at her. Discovery by Patricia and Michael would be catastrophic. Patricia, sensing a shift, grew suspicious. Sterling's guarded demeanor, his secretiveness raised red flags. She confronted him, demanding answers. Sterling, summoning his old cunning, deflected her accusations, feigning illness, weakness. Patricia, though wary, accepted his facade, believing time was still on her side. But the confrontation fueled Sterling's urgency. He accelerated the will revision, working relentlessly with his lawyer. Sarah, too, worked tirelessly, ensuring every detail was perfect. Finally, the new will was complete. Sterling, hand trembling, signed the document, a final act of defiance. The lawyer, a man of integrity, assured him his wishes would be honored. Relief washed over Sterling, mixed with bone-deep exhaustion. He'd done it. He'd taken back control. Sarah, too, felt a wave of relief, but knew the battle wasn't over. As the inevitable drew closer, Sterling reflected on his life. Regrets surfaced, particularly regarding Jessica. These reflections brought sorrow, but also acceptance. He'd made mistakes, but he was trying to right them. Sarah remained by his side, more than a nurse, a friend. Her empathy eased his burden. Sarah, in turn, faced her own inner turmoil. She was complicit in a deception, but her conscience was clear. She was doing what was right. Then, unexpectedly, Jessica arrived. Years of estrangement dissolved in a moment. She'd come to see her father before it was too late. Joy and regret overwhelmed Sterling. He confessed his failings, begged for forgiveness. Jessica listened, conflicted emotions swirling within her. She saw his pain, his remorse. Understanding dawned, then forgiveness. Reconciliation with Jessica transformed Sterling. A profound peace settled over him. He'd finally mended the deepest wound. In his final days, Sterling found a serenity he'd never known. The relentless pursuit of wealth faded into insignificance. Relationships, love, became paramount. He cherished his time with Jessica, building a connection that healed old wounds. Jessica saw her father anew, recognizing his vulnerability, his regret. They found solace in each other's presence. Sarah, witnessing this transformation, felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She'd played a part in this healing, in Sterling finding peace. As the end approached, Sterling faced death with tranquility. He died knowing he'd corrected a crucial part of his life, leaving a legacy of love, not just wealth. The will reading was a tense affair. Patricia and Michael, arrogant, expectant, took their seats. Sarah stood beside Jessica. Both women braced for the storm. The lawyer began to read. Sterling's intentions unfolded. A substantial portion to charity, a generous sum to Jessica, far less than Patricia and Michael anticipated. Laura's rage erupted, accusations flying. "Manipulation! He wasn't in his right mind!" The lawyer remained calm. Mr. Sterling recorded a video explaining his decisions. The video played. Sterling's voice filled the room, clear, resolute. He spoke of his mistakes, his regrets, his desire to do what was right. These changes are about more than money. It's about justice. The video ended. Silence descended. Patricia and Michael were stunned. Jessica, deeply moved, offered Patricia and Michael a portion of her inheritance, not to erase the past, but to move forward to find peace. Patricia, deflated, accepted. Michael, subdued, offered a quiet thanks. The tension eased. Patricia, defeated, retreated into herself. Sarah, mission accomplished, prepared to leave. Before departing, Sarah spoke with Jessica. "I don't know how I would have gotten through this without you," Jessica confessed, tears in her eyes. Sarah smiled sadly. "It was an honor, Jessica. Your father found his peace. Now, find yours." They embraced. Sarah left the penthouse, her heart heavy, but at peace. Jessica, shouldering her father's legacy, transformed her life. She established a foundation, channeling his wealth into charitable causes. Community work brought her a sense of purpose, healing old wounds. Patricia and Michael, humbled, sold the penthouse, moved to a smaller home. Patricia found solace in gardening, Michael in carpentry. They rediscovered simple joys, their bond strengthening. Jessica and Sarah stayed in touch, sharing their journeys. Sarah, in a new city, applied her hard-won wisdom in a local clinic. Robert Sterling's legacy wasn't just wealth, but a profound lesson. True riches lie in human connection, in love, in forgiveness. He was flawed, but in the end, he sought redemption. His final actions rippled outwards, transforming lives, a testament to the complex, ultimately human heart of a self-made man. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement means the world to us.